Thank you, everyone from the heavy lifters. That was really super and amazing. I'm so grateful for this time, your voice, and your work on this. Is Vicky Werth in the audience, and is she here, ready to
Yes,
go?
I am here.
How fantastico, Vicky!
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, so I'm going to be talking. Can you hear me pretty well?
We
Oh yeah.
can. And
Okay.
you have just about 5 minutes, Dr. Worth.
I
Thank you for
know.
your
Okay.
brevity and your expertise. We love our medical advisors. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so we're going to talk about unintended consequences of clinical trials in rare diseases. I think we've already heard about some of the issues around muscle exam, and I'm going to be focusing more on the skin exam. So next slide. And I do some work to try to advance studies. And so this is just letting you know some of the work that I've done. Next slide. And so we've already know about myositis, so I can really be very brief about that. But we've talked about the TIS as more of a muscle measure, which includes the MMT8. And so the TIS is being used as a primary outcome for most studies. What that means is there's no direct measure of skin activity. And we'll talk about the implications of that. Next slide. So it basically, because the TIS is more of a muscle measure than anything, it means that the trials are mainly recruiting patients who have muscle disease. And we know there are many, many patients who have only skin disease. And what that means is that the trials are being done with skin patients not included. And when drugs get approved that help the skin, it's pretty hard to get it for the patients who don't have muscle disease. And so that's sort of the capsule summary of what I'm going to tell you. But there's a lack of skin assessment, and we can go to the next slide. And basically what we know is from a patient voice that the skin is really important to people. So what this was actually was a survey or poll that was done during a patient-focused drug development that was involved TMA and as well. And what you can see here is that the skin complaints were like the highest number of complaints that patients had. And below that was fatigue, and even below that was muscle weakness. So you can see the problem of only having a muscle-focused measure is you're leaving out a big complaint that people seem to have. Next slide. And so we do actually have a skin measure that's been validated and used in many of the trials as a secondary outcome. But because it's only secondary, it means that we can't, when the approvals happen for the muscle patients, it doesn't necessarily extend to the skin. Yeah, keep going. So the CDASI, can you go back? CDASI in combination with measures of muscle weakness and overall DM disease activity may better capture improvement. And so we've developed a new measure, next slide, that allows us to combine elements of the TIS, namely the MMT that you can see up there, and maybe someday we'll be swapping out the MMT for the FI3 that we were just hearing about. And then the CDASI you can see is the skin measure, and they're given equal measure here. What we're showing you with the improvement score is identical weight to muscle and skin. And then there are global assessments from the physician side and the patient side. And all of these together can give us a composite tool that will allow measuring our patients. Next slide. And so we applied that to a study that we did, a phase 3 trial. And what this is showing you is that when you use the TIS, which includes the MMT, that when the patient wasn't better on the skin response side, the left side, they weren't better with DMOMs. But when you could show that the patients were better in terms of the skin with TIS, they were even better with DMOMs. And that's not surprising because there is a direct measure of skin. So the orange line is doing better than the blue line, but we can, in this kind of situation, include patients who are skin-only patients with significant dermatomyositis, with itching, and really a problem. On the right-hand side are the muscle responders. And what you're seeing here are the people who didn't respond to this particular med. The TIS and the DMOMs didn't show very much. It's a flat line at the bottom there. But when you look at the muscle responders, again, you can see that the DMOMs captured the muscle responders better than TIS. And that's, again, I think, a reflection of the fact that often the skin and muscle get better together. But again, more sensitive measure. Next slide. So compared to the TIS, DMOMS is simpler. It's 4 instead of 6 components. It captures greater improvement in both muscle and skin, and it seems to perform well as an outcome measure in dermato trials that include patients with both muscle and skin activity. Next slide. So what is the impact of, again, not having a skin involvement? Well, 20% of dermato patients have no detectable muscle involvement, and they're not in trials. 40% of classic DM patients with muscle disease, and we've heard a lot about the muscle disease, but in a lot of patients, it does get better. And then you're left sometimes with chronic sort of skin issues. And those patients also, because they're not weak, cannot be included in trials. So we're excluding a lot of patients. And we know that the skin is important to our patients. Next slide. So failure to include these patients means that it can be hard to access. And I'll give you an example. So we use IVIG for dermatomyositis, whether it involves muscle, skin, or both. So we've been using it for many, many years, and we were lucky to get really a very unique approval from the FDA for use of IVIG in a trial, which was great that the trial was done, but the only patients in the trial were muscle patients. They had to be weak to get into the trial. What that meant is when we got that approval, some of the skin patients started having trouble getting IVIG. And I now spend time doing peer-to-peer complaints with the insurance industry to try to get IVIG approved. So it's really important to include our skin patients. And so keep going. Next slide. Yeah. Accurate, go back. Okay, so we want to have the ability to include all our patients. And if we can do that, it will prevent loss of access to meds for patients whose active disease manifestations fall outside of trial inclusion criteria. Including more patients in trials of novel therapeutics will be very helpful because there are such limited treatment options, and we all really hate the use of steroids. Protecting recruitment is really important because we won't be having studies if we can't fill the studies that we have that are very exciting with really great drugs. So we need to be able to broaden out who can be in trials for a rare disease. And I think that that's the bottom line is we are really all of us together working to validate DMOMS in more of a clinical trial setting so that we will be able to enroll many different types of patients. Thank you very much.